Hey everyone, Adam Kanakin here with ILET Network. It is my pleasure to bring you this live panel discussion on active threats here at the 2022 ILET Summit. This is the third year we've been able to put the summit on, and every single time I am just honored and excited to share as much information as we possibly can with you and with the rest of the world. It's truly with collaboration and through community that we're able to accomplish everything that we can within the public safety sphere. And today's going to be no different. I'm going to be bringing on a group of instructors and experts that are international, that have experience beyond anything that I could ever have. And this is going to be a great conversation today, talking about the difference between prevention and response when it comes to active threats, not just active shooters, but everything that we can imagine. And so that's what today's conversation is going to be about. I do want to give a huge shout out to our friends at AARDVARK. AARDVARK is going to be the sponsor for today's session. They are an amazing company run by John Becker, who I've had the privilege of having conversations with multiple times. He is doing a session for this year's event, and he's also the host of The Debrief, which is an amazing new podcast. If you haven't already checked it out, make sure to do so. AARDVARK is a world leader in tactical drones and robotics. They have a lot of things, including the kinetic breaching tool and things that we can utilize in our day-to-day and tactical operations around the world. So if you haven't checked them out already, go to aardvarktactical.com. Check them out. Believe me, it'll be worth your time. All right. That being said, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring on the panel for today's discussion. And before I do that, just a few housekeeping notes. Depending on where you're joining us from, it could be on YouTube, it could be on Facebook, it could be on LinkedIn. There is a chat function. Now, there is going to be a delay just because of the way these things work. But if you have any questions at all for our panelists, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll be able to draw from those to help guide our conversations today. You can also have conversations peer-to-peer and with one another there as well. This conversation also doesn't stop here. We are going to be uploading this session back to the summit, of course, after this for tomorrow. And there's going to be a chat associated with that. We're also probably going to be hosting another live Q&A post-event to follow up on this conversation, because this is definitely something that we need more than 2 hours to really dive into. So with that being said, what I would like to do is I'd like to bring up the panel and let's get this thing started. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me here today on this roundtable for the 2022 ILET Summit. What I would like to do is I'm going to let everybody go around. We're going to go around the table here, go around the horn. And let everybody just introduce themselves, and I'll throw some display names up so everybody can see who they are and what, and then you can explain kind of who you are and what you do. And we'll just kick this thing off and get it rolling. So Lynn, why don't we start with you, brother? Give us the Coles notes, who you are and where are you from?
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. First, I'd just like to say thanks for bringing me on. It's always great to be a part of these panels. My name is Lynn Westover. I'm partner and co-founder for Six Layer Concepts and Consulting. After spending a career in Marine Corps Special Operations as a Force Reconnaissance Marine and a Scout Sniper, I was involved with a lot of the early human behavior pattern recognition programs, both for the Marine Corps and for the Army. So everything from Combat Hunter to ASAT, SOFSAT, and ITSAT. Most notably, I spent quite a bit of time in Afghanistan in an unarmed and embedded role to identify insider threats and teach coalition forces as well as American forces those pre-attack behaviors and indicators. And currently we train law enforcement all over the country, basically in just decision-making in the utilization of observations across the human terrain to make better decisions that are legal, moral, ethical, free of implicit or cognitive bias.
Right on, brother. Well, happy to have you here. Rob Carlson. Oh, by the way, for people watching this, and this wasn't necessarily intentional, but I also find it hilarious. There are 3 Robs on today's panel and 2 Adams. So, Lynn, you're the odd man out. So I'm going to do my best. Probably we're just going to take the old military route, and I'm just going to refer to you with by your last name. because that just makes the most sense. So Rob Carlson, why don't you go ahead, brother?
Hey, Adam, appreciate it. And kind of like Lynn said, I want to thank everybody for taking time to participate in the summit, as well as sit down and kind of listen to this roundtable. My name is Robert Carlson. I'm a civilian police officer with the Memphis Police Department. I'm the active shooter program coordinator. So I run all the active shooter training for all the law enforcement officers in that region. I've been doing that for around 9 years. And I've been doing active shooter training for going on roughly about 20 years now. Did a lot of active shooter work in the military. I've spent about 26 years in the military, last 6 or so assigned to special warfare, doing various things with them. And used to, kind of bounced around the active shooter world for a while. And now I run several organizations that deal with active shooter, one of which is a nonprofit focused on active shooter prevention, and then the other one's more of a tactical training for law enforcement on to how to react and respond to active shooters. And then other than that, currently I work for the National Guard Bureau as well as an instructor for their counter drug program, teaching tactical medicine and active shooter response for civilian departments under a federal funded program.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you taking the time and being here. I know Lynn is currently teaching a course. He stepped out into a different room to jump on with us. You're always teaching as well. Rob Out, please introduce yourself, sir, and good afternoon or good evening to you.
Good. In the Netherlands, I'm from the Netherlands. It's now good evening. Thank you, Adam, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody who's listening in. As Adam said, my name is Rob Oud. I'm a police commissioner in the Netherlands, still until the 15th. Then I'm going to be on retirement, early retirement. And I've worked for 44 years with the Dutch police. And the last 12 years I've been working in the prevention of radicalization. I was national advisor on PCVE, preventing and countering violent extremism. Next to working for the Dutch police, I'm also expert for several organizations like the CPOL, and CPOL stands for the European Police Academy. And at this academy, I'm the co-chair of the CPOL Knowledge Center on CT, in which we develop CT trainings for European police officers. I've also been working on the training myself called SEPRA. It's about awareness and prevention of radicalization, early detection, and that's also my expertise, prevention, early detection. I do trainings, workshops, train the trainer, and I'm also expert for several international organizations on this topic. Other topics my expertise are multi-agency working, early detection, prevention, training. Well, I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
That's awesome, brother. I'm excited to have you and definitely bringing the European context to this conversation, because we had talked about this a little bit offline as a group. I mean, we do things a little bit differently here in North America than you do over in Europe. Both are relevant, but at the same time, I think it's important that we start having these conversations more often. And so I'm so excited to have you here. Adam Blanton, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So again, Adam Blanton coming in live from the exciting East Central Indiana. Yet very riveting. Not quite as cool as the Netherlands. I don't know how I got to follow that one up. But again, you catch me today in my daily grind. I am a civilian police officer. I've been doing this for over a decade. I am a FBI TFO liaison with the Indy Field Office, work with the BAU, Behavioral Threat Assessment Center. I'm also a National Threat Evaluation Reporting instructor, master trainer through United States Department of Homeland Security. Prior to this, law enforcement, I was a nurse. So for me, threat prevention, threat mitigation, early detection, all of those things really kind of hit my wheelhouse. I'm the founder of our local threat assessment, threat management team here in the community in which I live in and serve in. And one of the big things for me that's kind of started me going into my own consulting through Essential Elements is that the need to really make this practical, to make this applicable. And couldn't be more excited to be with the group today to kind of talk about that.
Well, I appreciate you being here, brother, and definitely shout out to your command staff for allowing you to jump on board during work hours. So that's perfect. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Rob Chadwick, why don't you go ahead, brother? You're muted, big guy. Always one. There's always one.
Always one. It's usually me. Thank you, Adam, for the opportunity to be here again. It's an honor to be amongst your guests on this panel. And sad we're still talking about it, but I think you've really assembled a really great cross section to talk about it. With the federal, state, local, international partners. My background, when I retired from the FBI after 22 years, my final assignment was as the chief of the FBI's tactical training unit at Quantico, where our unit was responsible for not only training all of our agents, but my favorite part of the job was running our street survival training for our state and local and tribal partners. We also, of course, were responsible for the active shooter training that the FBI does in conjunction with the ALERT program. I've been part of that, or was part of that before I retired, since its inception with the FBI right after Newtown. My active shooter, involvement has started back in 1999 when I was a young policeman, serving as the most difficult year of my career in law enforcement as a school resource officer in Northern Virginia as part of the Fairfax County Police Department. The day that Columbine happened, I happened to be on duty as an SRO, and that, as all of our panelists know, changed everything. So sadly, we really have not come a long way since those days, and as the numbers bear out, we've seen an incredible uptick in frequency and lethality, unfortunately. One of the things that I know we're getting ready to kick this off, but I think it's worth noting statistically, because that's kind of what the FBI does, is statistics, right? From 2000, when we started keeping track of these attacks, these active shooter attacks in the United States alone, from 2000 to 2006, we averaged 6 active shooter attacks in the United States per year. Last year, the number for 2021 was just released, and we had 61. So a tenfold increase. Sadly, clearly what we've been doing thus far is not working, and I'm really excited to see what this panel, and obviously we've got lots of very experienced people in the audience as well, putting our minds together, maybe bringing in some outside help. I know AARDVARK is a sponsor of this. Love seeing that technology brought to bear. Adam, as you know, I'm a consultant for Axon. Super excited about some of the things they're doing as well. But just involving some of these maybe non-law enforcement minds, right? These really creative thinkers that the more diverse, the more cognitively diverse we can get this panel or this team or effort, the better chance we have at solving this incredibly complex problem. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. And so here's the interesting part about this conversation. And Rob, you touched on it there. And, I'm looking at the chat. We have people from Chile. We have people from South Africa. We have people from Australia and Canada. We've literally covered the globe already. And we just started. So that's phenomenal. Thank you all for joining us. That's absolutely amazing. To your point, bringing in context, bringing in experience that's outside of your bubble and outside of your own little sphere of influence is so critical. It doesn't matter if we're talking about active shooter, active threat, or we're talking about law enforcement training in general. I think that's something that every single one of us here will agree, is that as an industry, we need to do better. You're right. It is unfortunate that we're seeing an uptick in these incidents, especially in the United States, but we are seeing it internationally. I mean, we can talk about what just happened up here in Canada and Saskatchewan, where we had a couple guys run around one of our reserves and stabbed and killed over 10 people. We've had our active shooter incident, which was one of the craziest ones that we've had in North American history, where we expanded over the largest distance, over 100 miles, where we had somebody impersonate a police officer and go around shooting and killing folks in Eastern Canada. I know Rob can speak to some of the incidents that were the explosive context, like the Ariana Grande concert in Europe and things like that. And we're not just talking about active shooter. We're talking about active threat. We're talking, there's a lot of attacks that take place with sharp knives and blunt objects around the world that hurt and kill many, many people. There's vehicle attacks. There's IED and VBIEDs. There's 1,000 different mechanisms of damage that we can talk about. It's not just firearms, but we need to have a conversation about all of them. This is the last thing I'm going to say to contextualize this a minute before I kick this over to you guys, and I'm going to take a big step back, is there's a few folks here who have been involved with the previous Instructors Roundtables that we've done on Uvalde. That was kind of the catalyst for all of these conversations taking place. You guys know that, and there's a lot of folks watching this right now. And if you haven't seen those already, we'll make sure we link those afterwards. You can check out on this page, specifically on YouTube, you can go back and watch those panel discussions. The first one was fairly heated, as you can imagine. It took place almost immediately after. But here's the conversation, and here's the concept that I want people to understand. Using that situation specifically, up until the point that first officer reached the threshold of that classroom door, and we can take everyone's opinions, but he was the only person who did his job that day, it seems. Up until that officer reached the threshold of that door, it doesn't matter what type of high-speed operator you had show up. It could have been a tier 1 special forces, super senior door kicker, pipe hitter. It doesn't matter, because all of those rounds that went down range in that 3.5+ minutes, those 100+ rounds, everything, all of that happens regardless of who shows up at the door. And I think we forget that. I think we forget that the police response in that incident was extremely fast, right? We can talk to her blue in the face about all of the perfect storm of things that happened to create the outcome of that incident after police arrived. But why don't we talk about what could have prevented it from happening in the first place? And I think that's the commonality of every single person here on this panel in the private discussions that I've had with you and that we've had as a group, is that why are we not focusing on preventing the incident from occurring in the first place? How do we do that? It's a combination of a lot of factors. There's human intelligence that we need to understand. There's infrastructure and security. And we have to understand information security. We have to understand physical security. We have to understand environmental design around our buildings and around the structures that we have. We have to have people understand security, understand ingress and egress routes, and 1,000 other things. All of this stuff can be done without having to retrain police on how to respond to an active shooter, which is where a lot of our focuses seem to have gone. And so today's conversation, I'm excited because we're going to be talking about the beforehand, the pre-incident. Obviously, we could sit here and talk to her blue in the face about all of the tactical options. And as you guys have already heard from the panelists here, there are some very experienced folks on this panel that know a lot about tactical operations. But I want to talk about how do we prevent this from happening in the first place. And that's why we're here today. And we're going to be talking about it from a local scale, a state scale, a federal scale, and an international scale. So I'm excited for that. So with that being said, I want to open up the floor to everybody here on the panel and to everybody watching at home or at work. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We are going to do our best to get to them during this 1.5 hours or so that we have with you live today. And if not, we're going to keep this conversation going further down the road, as we had said before. So is there anybody here specifically who wants to jump in and kick this thing off with a topic? All right, Rob Carlson, you're up, brother. Go ahead.
So real quick, just because I want to lay the foundation of what it is we're talking about here, when we talk about active threat, active shooter. So, and this is kind of important when we start talking about the prevention side. So I just want to get kind of that quick definition of active shooter events out there so that as we kind of contextualize this, people kind of know what we're talking about. So going off of just the FBI's definition of what we consider to be an active shooter, that's going to be any individual that is killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. Now, that means we don't look at the motive. We don't look at the weapon. It's just if people are dying, they're dying right now. We treat that as an active shooter response. Now, there is also a second kind of definition, if you will, when we look at active shooter statistics. because in order for an event to get thrown into the kind of active shooter database, if you will, we rule out any event that we consider to have a preceding motive, such as gang violence, drug violence, domestic violence, things of that nature. So when we talk about prevention, understand that, what we're really kind of talking about is those true active shooter events, not the ones that had the preceding motive like drug deal, gang violence, that kind of stuff. That's a whole different prevention model and modality than what we're going to be talking about, when it comes to these events today. This is kind of more of that random targeted acts of violence that you kind of stereotypically associate with the active shooter type events. But doesn't have to be any one location, doesn't have to be any specific weapon.
Well, maybe I can react on that, because I don't really agree with you.
I love it. This is the best way to start this out. Go ahead,
Yes.
brother.
That's from the Netherlands, and Netherlands with my experience on prevention and early detection. When you try to detect people as early in the process of radicalization or working to whatever way we don't like, that will always help, and it doesn't really matter if we look at vulnerable people. And at the moment that we find them, they are vulnerable to radicalization. But if they may have another situation or another friend, they might also be vulnerable for gang violence or other things. So if you want to detect them early, you try to detect them as early as possible. The problem is that then it's not a law enforcement task anymore, because we don't have any powers, because he or she hasn't done anything yet. So we have to get social services in, juvenile service, whatever. But together with the police, and together we can prevent this person from stepping further on the ladder of radicalization or other things that we don't really appreciate.
Yeah, I would agree with Rob Ott there as well. And not to disagree with my own agency, clearly. I love starting off agreeing with the FBI's definition, by the way. But we worked quite a bit on a book, and it's available online. There's for those that are out there that are looking for just some resources, FBI.gov, and then you enter into the search term. There's a search box. Just active shooter, and it'll bring up literally hundreds of really well done documents, resources for anybody to do some research, including all of the yearly updates to the active shooter study. But one of the things they worked on, which I thought was really remarkable, was a book length publication called "Making Prevention a Reality." And you read that, and it's really well done. And the reality is there, though. It is an incredibly expensive proposition in terms of identifying early. Like, let's say we're talking about a troubled employee, right? Your typical, hey, this guy's or girl is exhibiting the warning signs, and you go talk to an organization, if it's government, if it's private industry, doesn't matter. What is entailed or what is prescribed there is incredibly expensive in terms of time investment, right? You're talking a team of people surrounding this person for whoever, who knows how long. And I think, the reality is, I think that the bottom line tends to be the bottom line with the bean counters, right? So if you're telling me that I have to pay for this, person or this team to convene and discuss the panel, and then we identify this person, and now we've got to have somebody check in with them and talk with them and do all these hand-holding type of things. I mean, it really does add up. Again, I'm not saying it's the wrong solution. What I'm saying is the reality is people look at that and go, my God, do I have the resources to do this? Do I have the resources to pour into identifying and then taking the steps that are necessary to mitigate? That's it's just a very expensive, time-consuming, long process, right? And that's again, I think it's something that we need to discuss openly. Yes, there are ways to prevent this, but as it stands right now, it's incredibly resource intensive, which means, affects the bottom line for organizations.
I think one thing that we should dovetail into that though is what's the because whether it's the modality of the shooting, meaning like whether it is an actual shooting or it's some type of active threat after active killer, which Adam, I think Lon Bartel put a really good comment up there. It's like how sometimes our intention on trying to create distinction with all these things, sometimes we could create some also some cognitive dissonance within this. And I do agree with that. Let's look at, well, first of all, understanding, okay, what types of individuals are we dealing with here? Because as many of you gentlemen know, there is a big difference between, say, an adult versus an adolescent. Whereas an adult, 62% of them have a history of harassing behaviors, maybe some other mental health behaviors or drug, alcohol, substance abuse behaviors. Whereas with adolescents, majority of them do not. The first indication that there may be something going on, aside from seeing the external harassment that they may be receiving, is going to be that immediate steep drop in their grades when they start going into their planning phase, which in my eyes, based on my experience, it mimics almost directly the 7-step terrorist planning cycle. So even though they may not necessarily have an ideation of terrorism, specifically like political, cultural, or religious, the bulk of these active killer situations, and I saw it even firsthand overseas, the majority of them, somewhere near the 80th percentile, are because of some kind of perceived grievance. And an individual tips over, and all they are left with is a form of, hey, I'm trying to coerce you through the threat of violence for you to understand how seriously I want to take this. So I think going back to what Rob Out was saying is, well, if we can somehow identify some of these needs, behaviors, and we can have them be mutually supporting. In other words, specifically in the US, I don't know what it's like overseas in Europe, but we also have issues with drug use in teens. There's a lot of talk about the school to prison pipeline. And so all those different behaviors are threat behaviors, and whether I become radicalized in the sense of a true, ideological, like terrorism or a lone wolf type situation, or I tip over and I'm in some kind of organized crime or gang related behavior, the interesting thing about the behaviors is they are all essentially the same. It's just there's some minor distinctions there. So I think that's the first part, is identifying that, okay, what is it, specifically like in juveniles, is it a failure to cope? In adults, is it the same thing? Is there focus on mental health? And I know that's not the answer for everything, but then there's the other side of it where even us as individuals, like, the best prevention is a level of situational awareness, which I know we all would agree upon. And one thing that's really kind of thrown a monkey wrench in our ability as human beings to be survivable is this damn thing. This becomes my focus in life. I put my functional field of view, the 6 degrees that I view the world, which is like a quarter to arm's length, and now I'm buried into this thing because it's most important to me, and I've totally painted out to potential threat indicators that are all around me. And if we go primitively and look at this, and I'll leave it with this thought and let whoever wants to jump in, but the caveman who walked through the jungle or the woods and heard a twig snap and said, oh, that must just be a squirrel or something, chipmunk, versus the one that said, no, that could be a saber-toothed tiger, was less survivable. And I'm not saying that we need to be to a level of hypervigilance or hyper-awareness. I just think, as a nation or as the world, just being aware of the fact, like, hey, there's conversations that need to be taking place, whether it's me at my workplace or, me with my children, teachers. When you look at juvenile active shooters, like there's your intelligence collection right there. Those teachers, you talk to any teacher in a classroom, they know who their problem child is. And man, wouldn't it be great if, we could have interrupted the Chos or the Klebold's or the Harrises I mean, you never know. Even something just as simple as going up and making a contact. Like, for example, hey there, Klebold and Harris. I see you guys up there in the back corner of the dang high school yearbook photo weeks before you planned your attack and did your attack. What's all this? What's this about? What's the whole heuristics of pointing a weapon and the kinesics of like you're shooting people? Like, what, you think that's funny or something? And you never know. I can't prove a negative, but that could have been just enough to, at a minimum, make them think, oh, man, you know what? This is a little bit more hard of a target than I think it would be. Maybe I should go somewhere else or do something else. Just a thought.
Yeah, but Klebold and Harris both had narcissistic personalities, and they did go through probation, and they did beat their probation officer. The probation officer said, "I think he's a great kid." So, I mean, that alone isn't going to necessarily solve that. But I do agree with you completely on it needing to have the awareness. One of the biggest problems that I see, and I look at it, I read all the books, I've seen all this stuff. There's the scholars, there's the ideologies out there. Those are great, but it's practical application. Make it make sense to me. Make it important to me. The biggest thing that we see is just kind of the siloing effect, where mental health knows what they're talking about, but they're bound to HIPAA and afraid of what they can and can't say, even though there's regulations. You have educators who have the same thing, whether it's FERPA here in the United States, and they don't know what they can say or what they can do. The biggest problem that I see, or the biggest obstacle to prevention, is breaking down those silos to getting collaboration and cooperation between multiple groups, social services. Here in Wayne County, where I'm from, whether it's law enforcement, social services, prosecutorial, clergy, all of those individuals, and having those discussions, prevention through education. I think that's a huge thing. And like Lynn said, having those conversations, we've got to have them and start to do that. That is going to be the biggest thing. You don't know a problem exists until you've identified that there is a problem.
I just want to jump in here. If you guys are interested, Rob out actually his session today. It's fun. I don't know how my brain worked, but for some reason I had all of the Rob's sessions go live today for the first day of the event, which is funny. They're not all on this topic. Rob Carlson did TACMed. Rob Chadwick did the breakdown of building out the new tactical training unit instructor program for the FBI. But Rob out did his on radical extremism, and part of that conversation, Rob, when you and I had that recorded that session, we talked about these concentric circles.
Yes.
Who is around these individuals, and where does that start? Because it sure as shit doesn't start with the public safety professional and the police and it starts at home, and then it grows out to their schools, to the educators, to the clergy, to the friends and family. Those, when we start talking about prevention, that's what we're talking about. And it was interesting, and I know this is probably going to come up, but the conversation that Rob Chadwick brought up about cost, I would slightly disagree with that, for the fact that it comes down to an idea. I had a conversation with my wife's aunt after Uvalde happened. And I don't want to go too far deep into this example because I don't want to put it out on YouTube because I don't want to give anybody any ideas. But the idea was I referenced a scenario to her. And I explained one way that we could, how a bad guy would think about targeting a school, right? And just the myriad of ways that we could do it as a bad actor. If we red team things, the amount of stuff that we could think of is people can't even imagine some of the stuff that goes through our heads. And we're the sane ones. And so I bring an example up to her and I said, yeah, but what if you thought of it this way? And you can tell when that light bulb goes off. And then it was just the idea of changing her thought process into, oh, I never thought of it that way before. That small conversation that I had with her, she actually went back and she told me, she told her at her next staff meeting, they spent 30 minutes talking about that, right? It was that small 15-minute conversation that I had that then went, and then she shared it with her entire school. And I guarantee you that permeated through most of the school division where she is from. That didn't cost me a cent. It cost me 15 minutes of time. And so I agree with you. There are certain things when we start talking about monitoring and doing OSINT and other things like that, there is a massive cost associated with that. I agree with you 100%. But I do think there are small things that we can do that can make a massive impact when it comes to a situational awareness perspective. I'll leave it there and I will step out.
Yeah, can I maybe react to both Lynn and Adam, because you both said some really true things. One of the things was, Lynn, you said each teacher knows who is the guy or the girl in his classroom who's going to make trouble later on. And Adam spoke about silos. Yeah, that's correct. That is the big problem. That was always also the big problem in the Netherlands and in other European countries. We are now trying to solve it, and one of the solutions we have in the Netherlands is that we have a so-called care and safety house. That's a formal structure in which the local government, the local police, the prosecutor's office, they work together. They get all the signs and indicators. They do an assessment, and then they make a plan with other organizations together with social services, youth, juvenile services. They get all the information and they make a plan, and they work out the plan together for this troubled young man most of the time, and try to help him or to prevent him from going on the wrong path, and to make him stay on the right path. And we have mentor programs. We have other things that might help those young people. So that's very easy. And yes, and what you said is, we as first line practitioners are not the first to see that worrisome behavior. Those people who are with that person on daily basis, they are the ones who see that worrisome behavior. So but they can give with their worries. They go to someone else. They come to law enforcement. They come to the teacher. They come, and they must be aware. Is this a sign that maybe we have to look into this? And then we have to collect the indicators from other organizations. What does school know about this person? What does social service know about him or her? And then if you put all the indicators together, then there might be a reason to do something. So awareness for, let's say, at local level is very, very important. And if I may cite the 9/11 report, all terrorist incidents are local, or at least will start that way. We have to look local.
Yep.
And then we have much more staff than we will ever have as law enforcement. The only problem is, how do you exchange information with those other organizations in those silos? And we have solved this in the Netherlands by law. So people who may be on the path of radicalization, on individual base, we can exchange information. It's put in a standalone system. So it's not put in the police system, not in any other system. A standalone system, which is governed by the Care and Safety House. Put all the information in. We do the assessment, and if that it seems we don't do anything, and there's nothing going on, all the information goes out of the system. And if the law enforcement officer who's at the table discussing this person says, "I would like to have this information put into the police system," he needs to have permission from the one who had put in the information. So there's a little bit to safeguard that not everyone will directly go into the police system, because we're talking about prevention, about people there exercising their fundamental rights. So that's a solution that we found in there. So last remark about ideology or not. At this moment, it is very, very complicated. It used to be left, right, religious, and one single issue, and that was it. Now it's pick and mix. You pick a mix, and you pick some from this, and pick some. You can't say anymore that we have eco-fascists. Eco was always left, and now eco-fascists. They all steal a little bit, and it seems like everybody has his own individual ideology at this moment. So it's very difficult to detect also.
Well, and to add to that, I think you're absolutely right, because we do have to be careful. I mean, you cited the 9/11 Commission, but one of the big things that came out of it is, through, individuals' ethnocentrism and just looking at people through the lenses of their own beliefs and backgrounds. But now more and more, our communities, our schools, our businesses, our jobs there's such a mix of cultural and ethnic and religious and just personal belief systems that to navigate that, I mean, you could walk down the block and go from one block to the other, and the baseline is totally shifted and changed. And so, I mean, my nephew was going to OSU and was in the quad the day on November 28th, I think it was 2016, when that active killer, drove his car into the public area there and then started stabbing people. And I mean, we just did some training for Ohio State University, and their police department. They're very you know, consciously looking at ways in which they can have their training to basically kill two birds with one stone. And we firmly believe that, you know, the same kind of observation skills and threat identification skills that I would use for whether it's some type of routine traffic stop, some type of call for service for a, you know, health and welfare check, or whatever the case may be, those same skills are relevant with regard to identifying potential pre-attack indicators. And all it is just a matter of, you know, making the observations and becoming educated in that. And so they made a commitment. They've trained their whole agency. St. Louis County is doing the same thing. There's lots of great training out there, like the training that all of you gentlemen provide. The part of the problem is building awareness for some of the, you know, going back to the discussion about local levels, is building awareness for some of these smaller agencies to know, like, hey, you have access to HSI grant funding for this. The research is there to show that there is a crime-terror nexus. And, you know, I see such a bridge between this as far as behaviors and Rob, like you mentioned, it's that the ideology is a little bit, you know, muddy now. But just something to keep in mind is not all criminals will rise to the level of a terrorist, but all terrorists exhibit criminal behavior. So whenever you see a rise in criminal behavior or a rise in criminal activity, it is a pre-event indicator. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to go to the level of an active killer incident or some type of terrorist act, but the behaviors will be there. You know, Cho, he did pre-attack planning. He did rehearsals. He was actually on the range. People saw him practicing how he was going to go in and shoot that class. But again, you know, it goes back to like, there's human factors involved there where we make excuses for others' anomalous behaviors and we paint it out because it's just a form of denial. Oh, there's no way. And you see some subtle differences, like I think it was James Holmes, because I think his parents were out of like San Diego. When the investigators, detectives showed up after the Dark Knight Rises shooting in Aurora, as soon as they showed up to the door, his parents were like, what did he do? God, what did he do? You know, because again, it was there. And unfortunately for them, you know, maybe they wanted to help and they tried to help, but it does go back to resources. And I think, you know, the comment of like, hey, that could be fiscally demanding. I mean, we're already seeing where law enforcement is supremely hamstringed. You know, we have agencies that are putting people on mandatory overtime, time and a half. They're not able to meet their numbers for, academy training and having just good quality people. And so I think it is across the board a mindset change. We're trying to talk about all these different facets. And I think in this group, we all know that we have the experience to know that you can't just point at one thing and say, yep, that's it. That's the golden ticket. That's going to be the magic fix. It's all of these different things working in concert and skinning our knees a little bit too. Like not all of our great ideas are going to do the job, but we're at least talking about it.
I think, you know, one thing that you know, when we talk about prevention and stuff like that, you know, we keep trying to look at this like from a law enforcement perspective, but the reality is it's not. You know, we've got to get the community, the family members, the friends, the people that network and interact with these people all the time. That's where the prevention is, because that's the people that are actually going to observe the behaviors. And, you know, so a lot of it is how do we engage with them? And then that brings up, you know, one, we got to engage with them, get them, you know, understanding what is it they're supposed to be looking for, what are those atypical abnormal behaviors and warning signs. But then we've also got to destigmatize the reporting process. There's a huge issue when it comes to, especially when we talk about family members, that, you know, after the fact, when we go in and do the investigation, they sit here and say, oh, well, yeah, I saw it, but I didn't think he was serious, or I didn't want to get him in trouble because I thought I could stop it. And, there's just this whole stigma process of we're trying to criminalize abnormal behavior. And that's that we as an industry, I think that's what we really need to be focused on, is getting away from that, trying to create that positive environment where people can report behavior to us without worrying that we're going to come just crush this person, rather than we're going to come in and try and help them. We're coming in to try and get them help. We're trying to gear them back towards the appropriate behavior and get them the resources for help, rather than just come in and lock them up. Obviously pre-event, post-event, that's the whole different, you do it, bad things are going to happen to you. But, pre-event, we've really got to work on destigmatizing the reporting process and getting law enforcement to understand it's about prevention, not enforcement, when it comes to prevention.
That's not easy to, sorry.
No, yeah. So I was just going to hit on a few things. I mean, obviously, situational awareness is huge. That's a major component, and desensitizing, destigmatizing individuals saying things. There's a lot of different things with K through 12 schools I work for. Not having like a report a bully, really trying to make it more vague. Hey, report something that you saw. But one of the huge parts of prevention is management. I mean, that is absolutely a huge thing. It doesn't matter if you can see it all day long. You know it's there, it's great, but there's got to be that management piece to it. So that is where the resource kind of comes from. That is where it's going to cost a lot of money. You're going to have things that here in the United States of America, there is not enough mental health beds. There just isn't. There's a lot of cops that places across the United States that aren't having enough police officers, but I can tell you there is a ton of mental health beds that are not there. You're getting individuals who need to be seen, and you're trying to talk to a doctor and prioritize and say, hey, look, I know this one doesn't seem like it's as bad, but I promise you this is going to be one. This is going to be one who's going to be a problem down the road. So it's that management aspect too that really I think needs a lot of work, and whether or not it's resources for mental health, whether we're not able to use tools here in Indiana. We have a red flag law. We are able to somewhat help with taking an individual's ability away to have a firearm. But management techniques and management styles are absolutely going to be a part of any kind of effective prevention that we're ever going to even think about having.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say is that if you have the possibility, if you have the context, if you can make a structure, try and organize this outside of law enforcement, because people will always have the idea, when I report this to law enforcement, he will get a red flag. He will never go to another country again. So that's the reason why they don't report. If it's possible to organize it in a multi-agency session, like we did in the Netherlands, organize it outside of law enforcement, then the threshold to reporting their worries may be a little bit lower than because it's always difficult. And police and prevention in my country and in many European countries is always most of the people joined law enforcement because they wanted to catch the criminals, not make a better world. Some of them are, but most of them joined the police because they want to arrest the criminal and put them behind bars, not to be the one who prevent World War whatever. So that you have to keep in mind. It's all to me in our country it's still very difficult to convince the police officers that they can share their information with local government, with social services, because police is not used to handing over information. They are used to getting all the information, put it in a system, and not giving it to others. But there's also some mindset that you have to overcome if you want to work in prevention and work multi-agency, and that's not easy. I can tell you that.
Well, if I can jump in there, Adam.
Go ahead. Yeah, go.
So historically, I think it's important to take a step back and look at, we referenced 9/11, and when 9/11 happened, a lot of people may forget or not know. So here in the United States, prior to 9/11, it was illegal for United States intelligence community agencies to share information between one another. So for the FBI, my agency is the one that can go to the FISA court, right? So the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court that would allow us to do wiretaps and that sort of thing on national security cases. it was literally illegal for us to share that information, absent extraordinary circumstances with our domestic partners, right? Like we couldn't share it with DIA or NSA or, so after 9/11, immediately after 9/11, they changed the law, right? It went from a need to know to a need to share. Now, as typical, any government, especially the United States, we went overboard and, became sharing too much and flooded the system with a bunch of garbage. But we learned some lessons. We dialed it back. And
hence the USA Freedom Act.
Yes, right. I mean, there's some abuses there, but different show. But, the fact is there's history there. We've lived through it. We learned from it. We haven't really done that. So in the United States, it's very difficult. Like, for example, the uniform crime statistics that the FBI collects, we've got like a 60% participation rate amongst so for those international partners, especially, like it's important to understand that we've got law enforcement agencies at every conceivable level in the United States, like from one-man constabularies to, these giant agencies, and none of them really have a great mechanism to share information. And if they do, many of them, depending on the political affiliations and ideologies and alignments and motivations, just don't share. So like for the OCA program, law enforcement officers killed or assaulted, is a program that is designed to help our state, federal, local partners learn from assaults on officers and officers killed in line of duty. We've got like 60% or less participation rate just amongst ourselves. So, trying to break down those barriers, maybe it does take a legal change, it was a colossal shift in the United States right after 9/11 in sharing that information. We have to make it, and I don't know how, but, to break down those barriers that like our panelists have all said, the information's there. The education, I think piece has been pretty well put out there. It could be better. But then how do we communicate that amongst ourselves, even from sheriff's office to police department in the same county? Sometimes they're not talking to each other. So just a caveat. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but that it's the reality.
No, I think he hit the nail right on the head, and that was a huge, significant change in how we handled business. It just local, state, federal, tribal respects, because the communication wasn't there. You didn't have the left hand talking to the right. And like some of those things that came out of the commission, just in the disparity of like, or I should say the difficulty in dispatch, being able to effectively communicate with first responders flooding into the area. And, you ended up with a situation where too many chiefs and not enough Indians, and there was no organization. And I 100% agree with you that it is a shame that, we have powerful tools, like that. And, you still have 40% of the country for either one of them that aren't participating. And that's going to be incumbent on us to put pressure on our policymakers and legislators to be like, hey, you need to incentivize these agencies to become a part of it. Because if they don't have it with them, if they don't see what's in it for them to do that, I mean, then why would they participate? It's the same thing. Like, I think IADList has a great thing with their National Decertification Index, but again, it's getting the buy-in. So I think that's kind of what we've all been kind of talking about. Adam made a great point about it, is as far as like, hey, we need to have buy-in from the community. We need to have buy-in from law enforcement. And like, yeah, the point you made about here in St. Louis County, so we have St. Louis County Police Department, but then you have smaller agencies. And in this county alone, there's, I'm not even kidding, there's something like 100 agencies here. So you literally cross the block and it's a whole nother jurisdiction. And now you add that into the mix with like talking about things like we're talking about with the mental health component, the community engagement component. I agree. I think all the tools are there. We have all the tools for, included with regard to community oriented policing, procedural justice. We have our allied professionals, mental and healthcare. And when you look at the level of attacks that are taking place on law enforcement officers, which was a point you made, ramp that up even more for EMT and fire, because they're getting it even worse, and they're showing up to the fight without any weapons other than their wits. So I think if we can rebuild some legitimacy within our social services and our other public service entities with the community, that would probably go a long way. And especially when we have, a magnitude as well of non-for-profits out there that are just looking for ways to engage and to help with that. Because Ronald Reagan said, right? The scariest 9 words you'll ever hear. Hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. If we could get back to the community-based, engagement, and they even found that, that's why I referenced the whole drug thing, breaking the generational grip that substance abuse has, where you have families where it's generation after generation after generation are having issues with substance abuse. That the research has shown that engaging the family is the most effective tool for that. So how do we do that in all areas and make it a multi, hey, there are specific things, specific actions I need to do in response to a certain incident. I'm not going to treat a active shooter or active killer incident the same way as I'm going to treat necessarily an armed robbery in progress where I have a barricaded individual, right? It's a different set of tactics. But what are the similarities there that I have as far as leading up to those different things? And there are similarities there. So, yeah.
So I want to jump in here too real quick. There's a lot of comments here. I just want to bring a few of them front forward so that we can, maybe there'll be talking points for you guys.
Can I just make one short remark
go ahead.
To Rob, because he was talking about the, information sharing between agencies at national level. I can imagine in the Netherlands too, it's a national intelligence agency don't work with local police, only in very exceptional cases. So we don't have them included in our local network. The local network of information sharing is only local police. And police only shares information if they can. So if it's on an active investigation, sorry, they cannot share information. So only local partners share information. Then you have to try this from bottom up. If you put it from top down with all the national agencies, my idea is that it will very, 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 very hard to do. Okay.
No, it's a great point. That's part of the reason why I brought this group together to create this targeted threat prevention program in the first place, right? We have that discussion. We know that the public safety space and law enforcement agencies, whether it be municipal, state, federal, they're the slowest moving machines in the world, right? We're 10 to 15 years behind the curve on a good day. And so taking what we know and giving the community access to the information, what we can give them access to, is hypercritical, and it's something that can make an immediate change, but it also allows them to engage stakeholders from their level. And like what Rob was just saying, is maybe starting to push that conversation from the bottom up, which is probably the only real way to affect change here. I did want to just talk about a few of these comments because they were very interesting. Some about how do we keep the hands out of people who have mental health issues? Talking about obviously red flag laws, which is a conversation in the United States. It's also one we're having up here in Canada. Definitely one that's had in Europe. That's an interesting question. You guys can touch on that if you want. I think having a conversation about taking guns away from people is you're dealing with the symptom, not the actual cause, right? And so I think
the gun's just the tool.
Right. Well, like I said, I kicked this thing off by saying, there was a guy up here in Saskatchewan who went around and just went all stabby on people, right?
Well,
there was no guns involved. We don't even have guns up here anymore anyways. We just got, so I don't know if anybody here knows this or anybody who's watching this. Legislation was just put forward to our government that would remove access to any firearm, rifle or shotgun that has a detachable magazine. So I'll let everybody here just sit and ruminate on that for a second. That's a whole nother conversation besides the point. The other conversation, another great point was brought up by Sean. He's a fire paramedic, talking about how he's in Illinois. They're not allowed to force behavioral patients or patients that are exhibiting mental health issues. They're not even allowed to force them to go in to be evaluated anymore. That's a massive issue, right? And so up here in Canada, we have the Canadian Mental Health Act. Peace officers, if they deem that somebody is a threat to themselves or others, they have the ability to detain them and bring them to be evaluated by a mental health professional. That is something we have. I know it is different in the United States. It's different throughout Europe as well. Maybe that's another conversation to have. And then the last piece here too, I mean, it keeps getting brought up about what is the mechanism that we have in place to monitor potential bad actors, whether it be through government levels, whether it be through organizations like the NSA or CSIS up here in Canada, Interpol being one in Europe. Do we have the ability to monitor things like Meta and Instagram, and what is the capacity around that? And so there's a whole nother conversation and ball of wax. So I'll put those out to you guys and jump on whatever grenade you'd like.
I could talk very quickly just about your last point there, Adam, the Meta or Facebook or whatever. I've got several of my former colleagues who have gone to work for Facebook and Google, and so you retire from the FBI and you go work for one of these big private companies that are social media giants, right? They're the ones who have the data collection capability, and I know that they do have very robust shops, probably more robust than honestly the FBI has. And I can't tell you how many times my friend who went to work for Facebook, there would be an active shooter somewhere would kick off somewhere in the United States. And within a few minutes, I would get a call from my friend looking for a point of contact at that local field office. Like, hey, there's an active shooter in Springfield, Illinois, right? And this person has a Facebook page and we're on it. And I just want to pass along this information. Now, of course, that's reactive, right? Very helpful and very well intentioned, but of course, it's a whole nother ball game when you're asking these companies that are, like Apple and all these other companies, Meta. They're famously, devoted to individual liberty, individual information protection, that privacy, and I get it. I totally get that. But at the same time, they're the ones that have the access to that data. It's not the FBI. It's not the NSA. It's literally residing on the servers. And I'm probably going to be like, I'll disappear after this conversation, I'm sure. But, I mean, yeah, can't hear me anymore. But, the fact of the matter is, it's through those portals that's how we learn about this information, right? There is no mind tap. It is, what are they exhibiting? What are they leaking? Where's the leakage happening? It's generally happening on an online platform that belongs to one of the big companies, right? Whether it's Facebook or whoever. And how do we then, one, balance individual liberty and personal security or personal privacy issues with the greater good of the community, right? Because quite honestly, and here's a whole nother topic we could discuss, in the last 20 years, and I don't think it's completely independent, the last 20 years, there's been a major shift towards individual acceptance of whatever it is, right? So what we would have called really weird behavior when I was in high school is totally normal now, right? So we've kind of moved that goalpost. And I'm not saying that's bad. I admit I'm a dinosaur, but the fact of the matter is there's way, way, way more that's acceptable now than there was.
Makes it a lot harder from
ago.
The detection side.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And then, how do you incentivize and how do you empower those companies like your Facebooks and Twitters and whatever's to help, right? Because they're making a lot of money by doing what they're doing. And there
has to be a form of delineation, right?
Yeah.
So especially to quote the FBI stats for juvenile attackers alone, the level of leakage is something like 88%. You can correct me if you would know better than I do, but
it's very high.
88%. That's huge. That's huge. That's 8 out of 10 incidents. We'll take the last, 10 incidents that occurred with a juvenile, and let's whack out 80 of them and say they didn't happen because there was a reporting process. And I think as long as it was, in the parlance of what happened with Snowden and all that stuff, I think if people were just at least able to come to the table and everything was open kimono and say, hey, look, check it out. As far as we're concerned at Meta, Facebook, whatever we're calling it, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, if somebody makes a report that they are seeing forms of leakage, because once you put it out on the internet, I know like the words that are coming out of my mouth right now, once they're out, they're out. And that's in the public square. That I no longer have, with regard to what I'm saying, I no longer have a expectation for privacy as far as my words and what I'm doing. Now, when it comes to my identity, that's a different thing. So if we create a process where, okay, I see, I'm going to pick on Adam, Canadian Adam, not Indiana Adam.
Perfect.
You're my buddy. You're my square buddy.
That's right. We're in the square. Yes.
It's like Hollywood Squares here.
That's right.
Say my buddy Adam, I noticed some troubling things happening on his social media, right? I report it just there's all kinds of other reporting like, oh, you offended me. Like I can report that on social media. So there should be a process where I make, it's documented like, hey, I made a report. There's some troubling things on this individual's social media. And then the, social media has a due diligence to report. And then from there, law enforcement takes a look at it. And then they have to go through the process to obtain whatever necessary warrants they need to then have that personally identifiable information released. I think as long as there was some type of process there that was able to have the scrutiny of the light of day for disinfectant, I think people would be okay about that. Because to me, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like we'll use the Uvalde kid for an example. The amount of stuff that he was putting out there and saying.
Yeah. He was like the poster of the easiest profile in history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles said this kid was tipping over.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing.
If your nickname is school shooter, there's a high likelihood you're going to be a freaking school shooter.
Clearly these companies have, and I'll use myself as an example, right? So recently, just locally, I was going to run some CWP classes, just personal protection classes for my community. And I was going to take out, I think it was a LinkedIn ad, right, which is owned by Meta. And so I type up this very innocuous ad about, hey, come learn how to shoot, right, and safely. Buddy, it got blocked. Like I was waiting for the people to show up at the door. And I wasn't talking about, hey, let's go do a mass shooting. This is responsible gun ownership. This is personal, you know what I mean? But it was definitely, it immediately was denied. And it says pending review before I could post this ad. Now that's a paid ad, but why? You can't tell me that technology doesn't exist in the same company that could say, now wait a minute, this guy just posted something about just bizarro world that should trigger a flag. And I just don't know where it goes internally to a company with the resources and the reach. And again, I'm not picking on Meta, but they're the 800-pound gorilla in social media, right? So I just don't know where that goes.
YouTube's the same way. My wife's
it's a slippery slope argument, though.
It is. Yeah, it's so hard to start getting into free speech and things like that.
For sure, absolutely.
One thing I want to jump into just really fast to think about. One stat I recently had read was that states that have in the United States that have legislation on threat assessment, threat management teams have a 2-to-1 number of incidents where someone's either been hurt, killed, or just the event in general. And I don't say that because I'm here to be a proponent for state legislation or anything like that. I look at it from the standpoint that what it's saying is that where threat assessment teams and threat management teams are, whether it's statutorily required or not, they're making a difference. and it, albeit on the local level, schools, there's different. Florida, for instance, just recently went to one where they now have it. IDOE, or their DOE has a threat assessment, threat management team. And we're seeing a vast majority of things stop. So I don't necessarily say it because of the fact that legislation is important. Again, I think legislation can help push people into doing certain things. Again, when we get to the free speech with Meta and things like that, it'd be great if they did the job for us and flagged every time somebody said something weird. But I don't know how that'll ever be conducive or possible. But the thing that I really want to talk about is building at that local level your threat assessment team and having that collaboration effort. Lynn said it perfectly earlier. It's tough to get the buy-in. It is tough to get the buy-in, and you're going to have to work here locally to get individuals to do any of this. It was like, well, that's extra work. I don't want to do this. I don't want to handle this. I address it in a lot of different ways, but that is how we break it down. That's how you start to begin to make a difference. That's where mental health and sitting at the same table as you, and you're saying, hey, look, I have an issue here. Carlson said earlier, look, arrest shouldn't always be the option, right? In fact, for me, it's the last option that I want. I want to go through
everything
health
before that.
Exactly. I want to go through mental health services. I want to go through all of these things to say, hey, look, is this an individual, an issue? Is this a mental health problem? How can we get this person taken care of? Do I need to make an arrest? Now, sometimes I will say an arrest isn't a bad thing, because if I make an arrest here in the United States of America, there's two ways I can make you do something pending an arrest. They both have a judge's signature. One of them is a mental health hold, and the other one is some kind of post-sentencing relief or whatever it is, probation, whatever it is. So I can get with mental health and say, hey, look, I know you can't tell me what this guy's doing or can have, but what would help? Well, 10 to 12 sessions would help. All right, my probation officer is now going to write that in as a requirement. If they don't do it, they go to jail. Is that a terrible thing for them to go to prison or wherever else? Yeah, it sure is. But at least they're off the grid for 2 to 3 years. At least they're going to come back out and we'll be able to mark them again. So I really think that on a prevention level, the community level, the way that you hit to this is you have got to build those multi-jurisdictional, interdisciplinary teams and get the buy-in. And again, like Lynn said, that buy-in's tough. I don't know exactly how you do it, but having buy-in from something like that, and then having someone like Lynn come in and teach situational awareness, that stuff spills out into the community. It continues to go on. Then all of a sudden, everybody in a community, even if it's a little community, goes, hey, I know that guy who knows this. And then they know where to kind of take it to, and having that central reporting location. So I really think that's a huge.
We tell agencies all the time, hey, you got us here already, because we have a certain minimum amount of time we have to be on the ground anyways. We're like, just hold us over a couple another days or whatever. We'll go to the local church or whatever. And two, what it gives an opportunity to do, hey, this is great for law enforcement. Having some of those key members of law enforcement, those key leaders that are in the community, engaging with community leaders, that just gave you another opportunity for FaceTime. That just gave you another opportunity, because one aspect of this that makes prevention difficult is the fear of, okay, again, going back to, we make excuses for people's behavior. We see it even internally, oh, he or she's just having money problems. They're just having wife problems. They're just having whatever problems. And we make excuses for that. Whereas, intervening early, it's the same way as cancer. The earlier you identify that it's there, the better chance you have at treating it or mitigating it before it's just a wash.
Yeah, and I can agree that the buy-in from other organizations is extremely complicated, difficult. And when I said you have to try to put this bottom up, the buy-in you have to do top down. We were lucky that by law, the mayor in the Netherlands is responsible for the prevention. So he's the one who coordinates. So he says to the social service, you go sit on the table. To the juvenile service, you sit at the table. Police at the table. Someone from municipality table, and we will assess this case. And what I want to warn for is, in the Netherlands too, and other European countries, you have school who do threat assessment, and other organizations who do their own threat assessment. Try to get so much people together to make one threat assessment, because one common one. Because if school makes a threat assessment, they miss a lot of information that is with social service, with law enforcement, with municipality. Try to get them on the table and make one common threat assessment.
So
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on something Lynn had throwing up real quick, kind of agree with something. He hit a super critical point when he was talking about, getting out and integrating with the community and working with them. That's, that early detection is only going to come through community involvement, because that's who's going to see them first. If we wait until the point where their warning signs and behaviors have risen to the level that it's caught in the eyes and ears of law enforcement, like, where they're actually doing leakage online, we are super deep in the game and way behind the eight ball, and probably have a high likelihood of not being able to react in time. That community engagement, getting out to businesses, churches, schools, civic groups, wherever, that's kind of what my role in the prevention aspect is. There are people far smarter than me, all of which sitting on this panel, that are great at all the other aspects. Kind of my role is that community engagement of working those civic groups, telling them how to be that early warning system for us. What are the early stage warning signs? What are those warning behaviors? Who do they need to report that information to? Kind of going through that whole process with them, and then working with your community on, from a prevention side, but also a preparation side as well. How do we have our systems in place? How do we make policies, whether it's a business or, church or something like that? How do we create those plans? How do we do security assessments? How do we do threat assessments? Who do we call for threat assessments?
When do we call
the community?
So
that's, if I could add just one more stat to that. When you look at the behavioral sciences white paper that they did on active killer incidents from 2000 to 2013 that they released in June of 2018, and I think you guys just updated it in either 2021 or
it's
2020.
Updated. It's updated every year, but there was a major update 2 years ago.
Right. But what they were showing, so for example, for us, our decision-making paradigm, it starts at a rule of 3. Once you get to 3 cues or 3 anomalies, then that means I proactively start making decisions, even if that decision is like, hey, I'm just going to wait and observe more. So it's not necessarily a forced continuum. That's not what we're talking about. It's just more about like, okay, I noticed the behavior now. I've reached my limit, and now it's time for me to make a cognizant decision about, okay, now you have my attention, or no, hey, maybe it's to the point where I need to reduce the threat. But what it showed in those stats was that it was like something like an average of 4.7 concerning behaviors. The FBI calls them concerning behaviors. We call them anomalies. Some of the old school guys probably call them red flags or, dead giveaways. But an average of 4.7. So if I'm going off of a rule of 3, that's already getting me to a point of being predictive and proactive. Now, all the cases that were less than 3, so we're talking 1 or 2 concerning behaviors were present, those 1 or 2 concerning behaviors by themselves warranted law enforcement contact. So when we look at that and talking about up-armoring just the basic individual with a level of awareness of not just pre-attack indicators, but then, okay, well, who am I going to talk to? How am I going to talk to? What do I know? Who needs to know? And have I told them yet? And it's not perfect. Like, I would love to believe that we could completely 100% solve this problem, and we're all going to be having peace, love, and hair grease and walking off into the sunset together. We know the reality. We're talking about human beings here. If somebody's determined to hurt or kill somebody, they will do that. We know that. But, again, this is a discussion about, at a minimum, how can we start to mitigate that?
So, excuse me, I'm going to jump in real quick because there's been a couple questions, and I know there's a few of you that want to jump in on some of these. One of the last ones here, though, Jeff just asked, other programs beyond active shooter training we can offer the community. Well, Jeff, let me tell you, my friend, you came to the right place at the right time. There's so one of the things, and we're announcing it, I guess, kind of here, but there's going to be a bigger thing in the new year. Every person you see here on this panel is a stakeholder in a new program that we are developing collaboratively that is going to be accessible to the community, not just for law enforcement, but for houses of worship, for businesses, for schools, any place, anywhere that will take the information. This group here and a handful of others, including SEPTED experts, security auditors, everything else that you could imagine that goes into this. It is a large group that we've brought together. And every single person here, by the way, just so you're tracking on this, every person here has or runs their own company. It's not like we're sitting here as a single entity. Every single person here has their own vested interest in their own companies. Here's the difference, and here's why ILET is completely different, and here's why I work with the gentleman here on this panel. It's about doing the right thing first and getting as much information out to the people that we can. Every single person here is putting their own personal business aside to share their knowledge and information to make our community safer. And that is why I love and appreciate every single person here on this panel. But Jeff, to your question, there will be a program, and I hate to say, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a world first type of program that you're going to see, and it's going to be pretty amazing. I'm excited for it. So stay tuned for that. There was a question up here about mental health holds. And Adam, I think you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, just real quick. So I want to make sure that I hit a kind of a clarification point in that, we talk about these 24-hour holds. That's what we do in Indiana. It's an emergency detention. I think Florida may call it like a Baker Act. Across the globe, they probably have different words for them. They all mean the same thing. When law enforcement commits a 24-hour hold, we're called in. Think of it as this: we're generally dealing with someone in crisis at that point in time. So getting them there is great. Getting them to the hospital is a good thing. A lot of people complain the same thing. Well, once they got to the hospital, they were released. The hospital is not going to be a permanent bed facility. It's not a long haul stay. It's something to get them in front of a doctor, whatever else it may be, and to get the process started. Generally, even if they release them, they're going to give them some kind of outpatient therapy regimen, something that they want them to follow. So never, ever underestimate the power of just having someone on the radar. Taking them to there, you've now got the process started. This individual is probably either in crisis, and if they are, we're going to deal with it, and they're going to get admitted. If they're not in crisis, we now know. We now have someone to watch for. We now have something to look at, and we have a process to get started. So next time we deal with them, if they're on the radar, maybe next time they did commit some sort of crime, that we're able to start to wiggle. Maybe we're able to start working with our mental health people on that part and say, hey, look, this guy's coming in. He's on the radar. It's not really meeting rise to some kind of criminality, but I think we may be working. What do you think you could write, like here in Indiana, a mental health professional or social service professional can write an order that will essentially allow us to take someone, a judge, to take them and have them contained or committed. So that's when we start leaning on our partners and saying, hey, what do you think here? Look what this is starting to give rise to. So never, ever underestimate, and don't think just because they got released that what you're doing is not important. Them being on the radar is of importance and is an actual step towards prevention.
There's a question in the comment, or there's a comment here, and I want to get some clarification. So Stan, if you're still around, I want to get some clarification on your comment here, brother, because I went both ways in my head when I read it. You said realistically, prevention is maybe 5%. Prediction and awareness is almost zero when it comes to violence. Response and having something in place is the majority. Each situation is different. I'm wondering if you're a proponent of the reaction-based type training that we're doing, or if you're saying the exact opposite. I can't figure it out and parse it out.
I could see that going either way.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. Either way. I mean, and both are critical. You're always going to have, I think you have to focus on prevention, period, because that's our goal, is to make this go away. Is that achievable? No. But we could definitely make a huge impact. So you have to focus on prevention. But you're always going to have events that get through, in which case you also have to be highly trained in the response aspect. Our goal is prevent it. If we can't prevent it, our goal is to go crush it. Period. It's twofold. You can't rely on one or the other, or you will fail.
Well, I also would like to add there, because I think this is kind of where we've been doing that and again, I was part of it. Love the alert response and laser and MACTAC and all the different programs are phenomenal, but that's training law enforcement for the most part. Some civilian response stuff, which I'm kind of on the fence about. But what I'm most excited about, and we kind of touched on it, and I wonder if we have time to even get into this for the rest of this one, or maybe it's another one, is bringing these industries in, like AARDVARK, like Axon, like whoever, that, right, the law enforcement, as we've seen, the reality is the last couple of years, law enforcement response times have doubled in the United States. Not necessarily to active shooter events,
just in general.
Just in general, we're seeing a slowing of response.
It's like 14 minutes now, isn't it?
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
So
because of decrease in manpower. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, calls are holding longer.
Well, it's a whole litany of reasons, right? There's a lot to that to unpack, but the fact is, it's taken longer, and I think that's where I think that, I mean, we've got the most innovative industry in the world, in this country. I mean, all kinds of creative minds, and there's got to be, whether it's technology or hardware or a combination of all of it. And I'm excited, like that's why I'm working with Axon, and it's not a commercial for Axon. This is a commercial for American ingenuity.
It's okay. Axon sponsored the summit. You can pump Axon up a little
right?
Bit.
But just as we're looking at this, the owner, Rick Smith, the founder of Axon, got blasted. If you guys remember, right after Uvalde, he talked about putting tasers on drones. All right. And one day, maybe, right, it might have been early, he got crushed and there was all kinds of, but the fact is he was leaning into it, right, and bringing technology to bear, like automatic response something. I don't know what it is because I'm not that smart, but just training the police officer is not enough. It's clearly not enough.
Well, and I'd like to add to that, because again, I mentioned before, given the overlay of like the 7-step terrorist planning cycle, right? Again, I realize we're not talking necessarily about terrorists here, but the cycle works the same. So I have broad target selection. That's going to be hard to determine unless there's enough leakage where I understand that, like, okay, this is this person's like intended target. So some active killers will do that, not all, right? But then there's going to be a intelligence and surveillance phase. There's going to be a phase in which they have to use passive collection to identify the seams and the gaps of their broad target and specifically identify their specific target. Well, it's hard for me to know inside somebody's brain what their broad target is or what their specific target is, again, unless they telegraph that. However, I can see the passive collection if I know what I'm looking for, if I have the skills to identify what passive collection looks like. So passive collection could be in the form of, we saw it down in Gulf Shores Police Department. Once a year down in Gulf Shores, they have this huge festival, like music festival, like well over 100,000 people there. And one of the things that we were able to do for them is do training for not just their officers, but then their security personnel. And just by being able to expose them to like, hey, this is what this looks like. Well, they were able to identify passive collection where actual groups, gangs, cartels, whatever you want to call them, were targeting the citizens, the civilians that were there, marking them to be able to either mug them, pickpocket them, rob them, whatever the case may be. It looks the same. The behavior is the same. So, okay, well, now when I look at that threat assessment, because Adam brought up the threat assessment, when I'm looking at the threat assessment, and I realize that, okay, in my 7-step, I've got my broad target selection, my intelligence surveillance, my specific target selection. Then I've got my pre-attack planning and surveillance. Okay, well, there's another opportunity for passive collection. And then I've got rehearsals. And sometimes a lot of times your pre-attack surveillance and planning is in conjunction with rehearsals. So when I'm looking at most probable course of action versus most dangerous course of action, if I identify somebody who's conducting passive collection on what appears to be, could be a soft target, right, or is being made into a soft target, now I've got most probable this individual is doing passive collection in their intelligence and surveillance phase, and so they're this close to the bang moment. Versus, no, they may be in their pre-attack planning and surveillance, or they're in the middle of conducting rehearsals right now, and so I need to act now, or I need to at least pay attention more. Like if this is most dangerous, then I can act. And yeah, it's pretty damn close to where, the rubber meets the road. But hey, ideally, I would love to have a situation or event where we identify the attack, or the intention to attack hours or days or maybe even weeks before it happens. But what would you do with 3 seconds?
Well, that's the
You can do a lot with
key,
3
right?
3 seconds.
Yeah, 3 seconds is huge. And let's say let's say we're talking schools, or we're talking a business, or we're talking some a mall or whatever, right? Is there a way to, and I use the word harden very loosely, right? Is there a way to make a facility, through technology, harder to attack and kill more people, right? Is there a way to dissuade someone from saying, yeah, I'm going to go shoot up the school because it's literally wide open. I know none of the teachers have guns. That's a whole nother conversation, right? None of the teachers have anything to defend themselves, and the nearest police officer is 15 minutes away. Is there a way to have some type of, I don't know what it is, whether it's, physical barricades, whether it's, hardening of doors, whether it's,
Defense
some kind of robotic response. I don't know, but I'm convinced that there, at least part of the answer is innovation through technology. And there's money for that, right? I think we've just about hit our bandwidth nationally in terms of how many officers we can train in, whether it's alert response protocols or whatever. There's just so many hours in the day. There's just so many hours that, the police department can cut their guys loose for training. Like, I think it's 700,000 or 800,000 that Alert has trained, on the alert protocols over the last X number of years.
Yeah, it's
and
like
a lot of those.
I think last time I looked, something 850, 880, something like that.
Right, and I think with the retirement waves and the attrition, you're seeing them roll off just about as fast as you can train them up. Yep. So and with staffing shortages, you're seeing a less likelihood of being able to cut loose for the 2-day alert school, or cut your trainer loose for a 4-day alert school, or whatever it is. And I just know Alert because that's what I was affiliated with. But it's I just don't. I think that there's got to be a shift in the way we think about preparing, especially open venues, right? That are where a lot of people gather, whether it's a church, a school, a mall, a government facility, whatever it is, that sort of stands in that gap, so to speak, from the bang until law enforcement arrives. I don't know.
I completely agree. Innovation, yes, that is very important, but hardening all possible soft targets, that will cost a fortune. That will even cost more than doing preventive work at local level. And when you talk about the terrorist attack cycle, in my dictionary, when someone is already in that cycle, he is too far for my prevention. My prevention starts earlier, before he decides I'm going to use violence and I'm going to commit attack. My prevention starts at the moment that someone is troubled, he's angry, he's changing his behavior, changing his group of friends, getting a swastika tattoo, whatever, and then he is already troubled. And then with other organizations, law enforcement can do something already. If he or she is already in the attack cycle, it's very hard to detect. You said yourself, more than 50% of the attacks are lone attackers. They don't communicate with others. Extremely hard to detect with the traditional police means. Then you need innovation, yes. But do we, as a free country, we are only living in a free country, do we want barriers at every mall and whatever? I don't think that's the solution. The solution comes much earlier.
Well, if I could, just a second, dude. I'm gonna jump in here because Ben asked a question about left of bang, obviously, which is the buzzword. Thanks, Van Horn. There's the left of bang question. There was also Stan clarified my question from earlier, which was he said as a retired law enforcement officer, he would likely most lean towards response. Awareness is more vital than prevention, which Stan, and I don't mean to be a dick when I say this, but awareness is like the critical component of prevention. So you kind of just like contradicted yourself in your statement.
Oh,
Well,
boy.
we can get into that one in a second.
The key
And
thing
then
with
John Black
response
made
is that means a gunshot's already gone off. That means there's already been a victim. You can't, if you're responding, there's already a
John
body.
Black made this point: prevention versus disruption versus response versus next prevention, which is the cycle, right? And so this is one thing that's really interesting. And Stan, this isn't going to be the jump on Stan moment, but it's really interesting because our first summit that we ever did, we had Tim Kennedy on, and some of you folks may be familiar with who Tim Kennedy is, UFC fighter, Green Beret. When we had him on and we promoted the session for the summit, everybody thought we were going to be talking about shooting or we were going to talk about fighting, right? Which is the response component. What we did was we did a full training session on situational awareness. He'll be the first person to tell you, and he's one of the most deadly motherfuckers on the planet. He'll be the first person to tell you that he would rather prevent a fight than get in one. And
Best way to win a gunfight and a fist fight.
That is the critical component to this and about the awareness thing, which is to prevent things, we have to be aware. We have to enhance our awareness to prevent. And you're right. If we are in the middle of a situation, being situationally aware so that I can respond to a threat if it's in and around me, of course, we're everybody here on this panel we're geared up. We're ready to go for that. We've spent our entire lives for that. The problem is we are a very, very, very small subsection of a fraction of a percentage of the population of the world. And the thing is, how do we make the other 99.999% of people safer? How do we take our knowledge and how do we transfer that to others? I'm sure as a retired Leo, you still go to the restaurant and you sit down, and I guarantee you take the back corner booth at the restaurant, right? There's a reason we do that. We're hardwired that way, but the rest of the population isn't. This conversation is how do we take what's in our minds and how do we put that out to the general public? Because that's the challenge that we have right now. I'll let you guys jump in.
So if I could touch on two things, I want to just clarify with Rob, Mr. Out, what I was talking about. I wasn't intending to rely totally on like, hey, you can overlay the 7-step on this and it's going to be the end all be all answer to the question, which I didn't think you were taking that way. But I just wanted to clarify, like, I look at these different things as lenses, just like I would look at the law enforcement planning process that is predominantly used in Europe versus like the SARA model or even SMEAT. I mean, the list goes on and on. So once you start with that base level of observational layers, that is human behavior, and then you start overlapping all these other things on it, it becomes a little bit like the phoropter when you go to the doctor and they put the lens in front of you and they say, hey, is it better or is it worse? No, that one's not so good. Okay, how about now? Yeah, that's a little better. And when I line up all these, that's Ensley's definition of situational awareness and understanding, is perceiving critical elements within my environment in both time, distance, and space, fourth dimensionally, and being able to predict the outcome of all of those same aforementioned elements and using those in an operational manner. And I may have butchered that a little bit, but it's close to damn enough, right? And the comment that went on there about like left to bang, hey, you could call it left to bang, you could call it situational awareness, SA, you can call it stay frosty, or as they would say, hey, don't get complacent because complacency kills. But that is physiologically and psychologically demanding. It is not easy, right? And when, you know, I would say that everybody sitting on this panel has had a career and continues to have a career in utilizing that in conjunction with best practices when it comes to response. There's always going to be a stimulus response. But even when I look at like Hicks-Hyman law, and we talk about things like Nicole would probably kick me in the butt for this, Nicole Florisi, but when you're looking at the P300, and even like actually Lon Bartel with Vertra made a perfect point about this. Like I can be situationally aware and perceive things that I think are important to me, but without a level of training in the knowledge, skills, and abilities of like, well, no, that's not important. It's this over here. But because I only have a 6-degree functional field of view and I'm damn looking over here, I missed it. And I knew this very well. You name anywhere, Stan, any place I've been to, it is impossible to have 360-degree security. It is impossible. If there is a seam or a gap, and you have a determined attacker, or you have a determined individual, and beware of a true believer. I mean, I had guys that were wearing shalwar kameezes and paycoles and flip-flops, but that were willing to go so far as to spray paint, aluminum spray paint on tarps so they could break it up and add it to their homemade explosives and their unknown bulk explosives just to blow my legs off. So when you have somebody who's willing to go to the ends of the earth to do whatever they want to do, yeah, you have to start getting critical. You have to be able to look at these things upside down, backwards, in the dirt, day, night, mesopic times, in between times, and pick it apart. And, you know, that's to say that, yeah, we can very simply say, well, yeah, you just need to stop being so reactive and be left a bang or have some situational awareness. But that's what we're all sitting around here saying. Situational awareness is not easy. And then being cohesive in what we do with that. Okay, great. You saw it. That's my other favorite buzz term. If you see something, say something. Well, first of all, I'm not even sure if I saw what I thought I saw. I don't even know what the hell to call it. And who the hell do I call to begin with? I guess I'll start with the Ghostbusters. And then it changed to, oh, if you see something, say something, do something. And again, it turned into a buzzword. But until, you know, going back to what you guys have all said too, like, we've got to get people on board with, okay, no, I've had enough. I'm going to start taking a you know, actual dedicated step towards my own personal level of awareness and safety, and not relying on, especially when we look at law enforcement, who's got a 14-minute response for call for service.
One thing I want to jump in real fast, just reading some of the comments on the side, like a lot of them kind of have went with, you know, hardening the building, SEPTED, you know, having, hey, if we have a bunch of teachers in here well trained with guns and stuff like that, that's going to, you know, do a whole lot for our posture. Kind of what Rob Out was saying, and I guess I kind of go towards that. That's just one piece of the pie.
Sure.
It is in no way, shape, or form going to stop it from happening. Matter of fact, if you look from Uvalde, Buffalo, New York, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the Oxford County, Michigan, here in the United States, you look at it, most of those places had armed guards. You know, one of the things that when we talk about the bang buzzword, we don't know how some of these people are even going to react to it. So again, you can have every door shut, but just so happens a teacher goes out to the parking lot and a door doesn't get locked or whatever else it may be, depending on what conspiracy theory you listen to at the time. Again, it's not all inclusive. So I want to make sure that it's definitely a huge hit that, you know, all these tools that, you know, even like Axon, and they're fantastic. They're tools in the tool belt. However, one tool doesn't do it all. So again, these are outstanding things to talk about, outstanding pieces, just like situational awareness, like my Hollywood Square partner said. It's absolutely a huge tool. It's a great thing, but again, it requires work. It requires some knowledge. There's a lot to it. There's more than one piece to the puzzle. So don't get complacent on, well, I've made the building really, really hard. Human errors still exist. You know, oh, well, we all have guns. Sometimes when the boogeyman stares at you, you don't do what you thought you were going to do. So I just really want to clarify that's it's a great option, but it's not the only tool.
And a lot of these
show me a
attackers
secured
choose the
facility, and I'll
location.
show you a rock or something next to a door.
You got exactly. Yep.
Well, and a
Sorry,
lot
I
of these
didn't mean to
attackers
jump on you,
choose their
bud.
location not because it's a soft target or perceived soft target, because it has personal motive to them. You know, if they get fired from a job and they want to go get revenge for it, they're going to go to their job. You know, so yes, that prevents some. You know, that certainly will help, but it's not going to stop all of them because they have different motives for doing their attack. And there are plenty of instances where we've had active shooters take place in, you know, supposedly hard target buildings and or areas where, you know, citizens were allowed to carry guns, and you know we see the aftermath from it. So it is definitely a component for sure, but it's not the end all be all solution.
Adam, can I jump in for a second?
Murrah Federal Building was a hard target, and what did McVeigh do? He used urban masking and social camouflage. He dressed up as a UPS guy, and repeated the behavior, created change blindness in the people that worked at the Murrah Federal Building to think, oh, that's just the UPS guy. And then on the day of the attack, he just dropped his vehicle off and let it sit in. And I mean, he screwed up and didn't buy the smokeless fuses. So the cab was filling up with smoke prior to that blast going off in the portico. And yet, and I saw the same stuff happening in insider threat attacks in Afghanistan. We had a porta shitter truck come through fob shank. It parked, and here's the thing. Here's the critical piece of information that even the gate guards missed because of things like sequencing and channel capacity, all human factors. That Porta-John truck, the honey bucket truck, or whatever you want to call it, when it came in, you look at the videos, it was riding dirty. It was squatting. It was sipping gin and juice with Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube because it was filled with about 5,000 pounds of unknown bulk explosives, sodium dinitrate ethylene glycol. And then it was parked in a spot where it shouldn't have been parked, and the fact that it wasn't going from Porta-John to Porta-John, and some people noticed the behavior, but nobody reported it because it didn't cue enough in their head. And then when that thing went off, it just about leveled that whole base. So the behavior is the same, whether we're talking Alaska, Alabama, or Azerbaijan, it's the same.
Chadwick, go ahead.
Yeah, so we got a little less than 10 minutes left, and I think this has been really, I think, worthwhile. I love this group, a lot of different perspectives, and I think we're all in agreement that there is obviously no one answer. It's a whole panoply of things that have to go into this. But the one thing that strikes me about this conundrum is, I mean, if you look at our panel right now, there's two things that are in common amongst all of us, right? We're white, we're male. Most of us have at least law enforcement or military background, and we've lived this, right? We know that teams solve complex problems faster and better when they bring cognitive diversity into it, right? So my challenge to the world, to whoever's listening out there, let's recruit some outside thinkers, people who are not, don't live this, but it affects their world. Like this affects everybody, right? No one wants to live in a world where you're afraid to send your kids to school, or you think your wife or your loved one's going to be murdered in a mass shooting. And yet it's becoming ubiquitous. This is an everyday seeming, or every week there's another shooting in the United States. How do we recruit different ways of thinking and just completely different people to solve this, right? Because I think we're trying as hard as we can, but we bring a certain perspective and a certain background and certain biases to this. We need to broaden the aperture here and bring in some different thinkers, because we're heading in the wrong direction, right? 6 to 60 is not the right direction.
No, and not even 64. But I completely agree. We have to bring different perspectives, and I also agree with Adam that it's not only repression, not only prevention. It has to be some kind of balance in it. If you do one thing or the other, we will never succeed. And yes, we should have other opinions to help us, and to especially young people, because we, as you say, we are, let's say, over 25. If I look at in Europe, where with the Radicalization Awareness Network, they have all kinds of working groups all over Europe, and they have made an extra working group for only young people between 18 and 25, and they look at all the plans that we older people make. Mm-hmm. As young people say, well, this will never work, and they can also make their own proposals in prevention of radicalization. That's what I really like. So, if I want to put my money, just last word, I will put my money on the teacher, because the teachers can see out of 100 pupils, this one is going to be a troubled kid. Whether he's going to be a lone actor or not, but we need to help him, and that will be crucial, I think.
I'm going to give everybody a chance to go around the table here and kind of give your last thoughts on everything. I just want to say thank you to everybody for being a part of this. I'm looking at the chat right now, and we have folks from Kenya and all over the place that are joining us, which is absolutely phenomenal. I I put a link in the description here on LinkedIn, on YouTube, about our founding members group. I don't normally promote this kind of stuff, but this conversation is a great example of what our founding members group is. You can go to that link, watch the video, make sure you get a complete understanding of it. We have 200 members that we're going to be capping it at. And this conversation that we're having today is the same conversation we have behind closed doors every week with our founding members group. So if you like this conversation and you want to be a part of more of these, consider being part of our founding members group, because it is truly going to be the core team that helps grow and build what ILET will become, not just with our active shooter program, but we do things on research and innovation and ethics and values and training development. We have a lot of different segments that are part of ILET, not just the active threat, active shooter. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, we have a few spots left. Please check that out. If you haven't already signed up for the ILET Summit and you're just joining us on YouTube or on social media, and you haven't checked out the ILET Summit that we're running this entire week, make sure to go to iletsummit.com and register so you can get free access to all of the training, including training from pretty much everybody here on this panel, except for Lynn, because he's lazy and he won't send me in his training video. But that's besides the point.
Wow.
Everything else though, I just have to say the conversations and Stan, I appreciate your comment, brother. I know we kind of I singled you out, but you said something that was so awesome here about that it's about learning. It's about learning. And I'll tell you this, every single person here on this panel is committed to be a lifelong learner. I guarantee you we all took something away from this. And I know I watch the guys, they're taking notes. We go back, we re-watch this stuff because it is so critically important. And I appreciate you being part of the conversation. And that's what this is about. And that's how we're going to affect change, is by having conversations that nobody else wants to have. And it starts right here. So with that being said, I want to go around the table one more time, give everybody a second to say their last thoughts, and we'll cut this thing off. So Lynn, go ahead, brother.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus there, buddy.
You're welcome.
Buddy's only half the word. Yeah, no, I just have to say, like, it's an honor and a privilege to get to spend time and learn from a group such as this. And so, thank you, Adam, for bringing me on. And gentlemen, thanks for allowing me to rap with you for a little bit. And everybody in the chats, thank you for participating. And the conversation is what's necessary to happen. And if you need anything from any of us, that's what we're here for. Feel free to reach out to us and reach out to Adam at ILET. And the information's out there. You just have to seek it. So that's all I'll say for that. Be safe.
Right on. Carlson.
Just kind of want to echo the sentiments of thank you, Adam, for allowing us to have this conversation, and everybody that's involved in it. There's a saying out there that if you find yourself as the smartest person in the room, you need to leave the room. So I want to thank everybody for making me feel like the dumbest person in the room. Meant I was in the right place. But I think the big takeaway from all of this is it's not just one answer. If there was a magic answer that we could all throw out there and say, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, that we're going to prevent all of these active shooters, that would have been done by now, and we've all been rich. But it's not, and so there's a lot of complicated discussions that need to take place, and you need to look at this as a holistic approach to trying to prevent these attacks. And then at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to prevent all of them. So as law enforcement, we need to be ready to respond, and we need to make sure that the way we're training is the most effective. And I think that's an area that needs work as well. The information's out there, but I don't necessarily think that we're necessarily conducting it in the most efficient manner, as evidenced by several of the more recent events that we've seen. So I encourage everybody to keep training and, constantly try and be better. Like I said, if you find yourself as the smartest person in the room, you need to leave the room.
I love it. Mr. Out.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think that my last remark I did before was already kind of a closing remark. So I want to finish with thanking everybody who was listening and looking. And if you have the time, please take a look at my video, which is about the cascade training on prevention and early detection, and not only for law enforcement. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Adam.
Yeah, so definitely echo the same sentiment as everybody else. Thank you, Adam, for allowing us to be here. Again, this is huge. This is the future of what making a difference really looks like, and to be able to be here with these guys is really awesome. To all of you out there listening and watching, thank you. Like I said, you will be the change. If there's ever anything I can do, please feel free to reach out to me on social media, LinkedIn, at our website at Essential Elements. Either way, anything I can do to help you, any questions, advice, anything I can do, I'm here all the way. So thank you so much.
Awesome. And Chadwick.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thank you, the rest of the guys. It's been a lot of fun, and as you predicted, Adam, it went a lot faster than I thought it was going to. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what we can do, not only with this group, but challenging those others that might bring different perspectives, might bring different solutions. That's going to be the key, right? It's multifaceted, but we have so many talented people out there that are all, in some way concerned with this. That I think we really do need to reach out beyond law enforcement, beyond mental health professionals. Let's get everybody, that has a good idea. There's just with social media, we bashed a lot of social media. There's a way to collaborate, and like never before. And I think we can just draw out so many good ideas and come up with something by really diversifying not only what we're doing, but who is doing the thinking. So thank you very much. I look forward to maybe the next one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this. I'm going to ask you just real briefly, stick around for a quick AAR once we kill the live feed, and we'll have a conversation real quick before I let you go. And for everybody else here, thank you so much for joining us for this roundtable. If you aren't aware, tomorrow we're going to be doing a roundtable on use of force training methodology, and that is going to be involving some names you might know, guys like Tony Blauer, Jared Wahongi, Ray Bashirs, John Gentile, Jason Harney, and more. And it is going to be a great conversation. We're actually going to be showcasing some of the wrist lock documentary. Some of you may have seen this, some of you may have not. So we're going to be showing some exclusive clips from this, having discussions about use of force training and defensive tactics, how martial arts influences what we do in the law enforcement space. It's going to be a really fun roundtable. And again, it's going to be a great discussion just like this one was here today. Again, special thanks to our friends at AARDVARK. They're an amazing company. If you haven't checked them out already, you can go to aardvarktactical.com, check them out. And huge thank you to our friends at Breacher CRM. You may not know this, but the entire ILET network is supported and backed by Breacher CRM. They're not just a sponsor. We actually put our money where our mouth is, and they are one of the key solutions that we use to make sure we get ILET out to the entire world. So if you're interested in learning more about Breacher CRM, please let me know. So with that being said, I want to say thank you to everybody again one last time for being a part of the ILET Summit this year, for watching us and taking part in the chat. Make sure to keep this discussion going. This doesn't end here. Take it back to your departments. Take it back to your groups of friends, and have these conversations one-on-one. Have it with your families. Have it with your communities. Don't stop here. It's about investing and getting everybody up to speed on what we're talking about. So thank you so much for being a part of this roundtable, and we will see you tomorrow.